So it's good to see I didn't scare anyone away by being set up to preach today here. My process in trying to figure out a lesson really depends on what happened the week before, it seems. This past week I had an interesting encounter as I went to vote. And it wasn't an encounter with a person, it was an encounter with a computer screen. The computer screen said, "Choose your party." Now, for those of you wondering, am I going to delve into politics here? I promise I'm not. I'm going to tell you that that struck a particular failing in me. Because Indiana law does not permit a person to indicate their party affiliation as any part of their registration record. This is FAQs from the Indiana government website. And I know that law because I've actually looked it up. I looked at decades of Indiana government legislation trying to figure out why many people remember having to choose a party at one point in time in the past. And yet, I was unable to find any such time where that was legally permitted. Of course, I'm the type of person that when I get something like that in my mind, when I question something, I keep going until I find an answer. If I don't find an answer, then it's going to be a rough night sleeping. And, well, unfortunately, this became another rough night sleeping. So I thought about this contradiction a lot on Tuesday, and then I thought about it on Wednesday. One of my friends actually said, "But you're not an English major, why does it matter to you? Choose your ballot versus choose your party." He's making a point. It's all in the wording. It really doesn't matter. I don't know, perhaps I didn't like being labeled. Maybe I prefer closer adherence to the law. But why am I letting something bother me so much that really doesn't matter, and, more importantly, I don't have any direct control over it? So that got me thinking throughout the week. I had a completely different sermon idea lined up, and then Thursday I changed my mind. And that's what we got today. So hopefully this works out well for everyone, but really, it's about letting go. I couldn't let go of this. This little problem here, and I can go through these four things and what they meant to me for this problem. This problem is just a launching pad to the greater issue that we all face, and that is trying to figure out how to let things go. So, my pride, of course, is probably the biggest problem here. And some of you have mentioned, or at least a few of you have mentioned, that pride is oftentimes the root of all of our sin. And I can't agree with that more, especially in my case. My pride is definitely a problem, which is another good reason why you've chosen me to give a sermon today. Yes, that inflates the ego just a little bit, doesn't it? But I need to keep it in check. So, why did my pride come in as a problem here? Well, I know better. I Googled it. Why don't they know what I know? Now, mind you, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm not anyone who should be in charge of these things. If I ever run for office, don't vote for me. Okay? But my pride was definitely hit, for no good reason. There's also guilt. So I know the law well enough to know that I have to choose the ballot that represents the majority of the party I chose in the last general election. I don't really remember the majority of the people I voted for in the last general election. It's not just one office, it's all of the offices on the ballot. And that was 4 years ago. Do any of us remember that? I could probably guess. And for the record, I did choose the ballot that represented the party that I most likely voted most for. But there's still that guilt. What if I was wrong? Am I in violation of a law? I don't like being in violation of a law. And moreover, it says choose your party. Okay, well, then we go to fear. My fear is, well, if they get this wrong, how can I trust the process? Of course, that's a little bit of an irrational fear, right? We've been doing this so long that even the smallest little bumps in the road are probably paved over with the proper results, okay? You may agree, disagree with that, but you know what? It's still a fear that I don't need to worry about. And finally, worry. They turned the screen around, pointed it at me. It says, choose your party in the biggest letters possible, well enough that I would have been able to read it from outside the building looking through the window. So my worry is, well, if they see me touch one of these parties, is someone going to think that I belong to one of these parties? I'll tell you right now, I don't affiliate with any party because Indiana state law doesn't allow me to. So with that, I have to really think about why does this matter so much to me? Well, it really doesn't matter. It matters to me because I let it. It matters to me because I am doing something for my own vanity when I allow that to take up space in my mind. See, my mind could be focused on something that I do have control over, or my mind could be focused on something that matters. Or better yet, right in the middle, it could be focused on something that both matters and I have control over. But no, I'm stuck on something that I should let go. So with that being said, this sermon is about trying to let go. So I'm focused on something that I need to let go, and I'm actually trying to use this sermon in particular to help remind me that I need to let these things go. So unfortunately, you're all along for this ride on me trying to correct myself of my own problems. I hope you enjoy. I should also mention, this brings me to Philippians 2, verse 3, which states, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility consider one another as more important than yourselves. And I like that line. I wanted to include that here mainly because that reminds me that when I let something take up space in my mind and I have to figure it out for myself, that means I can't do anything outside of my mind. I can't help those around me. I'm literally doing it for empty reasons at that point, particularly when it doesn't matter and I can't control. But let's go through these four things and talk about them a little bit more. What do we know about pride? Well, pride's a big one, right? We could probably have an entire sermon on pride. In fact, I think I've actually heard a few sermons on pride in this building. Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride comes, then comes dishonor. But with the humble, there is wisdom. Boy, I'd like to be humble in this situation, but I think I'm the first part of that. Now, when you first read this, you might think, when pride comes, there is dishonor. It's because they were too proud to get it right. Well, no, I got that backwards, don't I? I have the pride that I need to fix. It's easy to think, well, I'm doing pretty well on my own. It's easy to think, I know what I'm talking about. And my wife will tell you, oftentimes, I don't know what I'm talking about and should be quiet. She won't say it. She's too nice. But when I open my mouth in pride, naturally comes dishonor. If I keep my mouth shut, be humble about things, I do find the wisdom. And I'm not saying it's always mine, or sometimes mine. We also could remember Proverbs 16:18. Everyone probably remembers this line. The King James Version says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." See, pride can lead us in the wrong way. In fact, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That's James 4:6, slightly different than what I have in terms of the Old Testament reference that he's referring to, but it's still true. God is opposed to the proud. If you know you're doing right, then you might want to check your pride. If you know you're in a good place, good situation, and you're doing well, you might want to check your pride. You might be fine, but check that pride. And finally, I love this verse, the Living Bible verse here, because this really goes along with what I'm thinking. The wise man is glad to be instructed, but a self-sufficient fool falls flat on his face. We're not designed to be self-sufficient. We're designed to depend on God. We might even say we're designed to depend on each other. So a wise man is one that is willing to be instructed, doesn't assume they already know all the answers, even though Google is at our fingertips. So if you're not facing any problems, just wait a while. Because if you're calling the shots, it is inevitable. Your pride will catch up with you, and problems will occur. You may just need a greater dose of pain to get knocked out of it. Or you may need a friend to say you're not an English major. God will eventually allow it to get your attention and show you that you don't have it as together as you thought you did. So, is your pride, particularly in this verse, is your pride preventing you from learning from this verse, interpreting it? Because the wise man is glad to be instructed. Well, they should be wise enough to be instructed. Well, that's the wrong way for pride, right? It needs to be about my pride, not their pride. But let's move on from pride. There's also guilt. Of course, guilt is pretty straightforward, right? Submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human institution. Well, that's what we should do, right? Now, rebelling against the primary elections is probably not God's idea of submitting yourself to an authority. Instead, do what you can. Do the right thing as you do it. You don't have to worry about the guilt, because worrying about the guilt, keeping the guilt in your mind, will keep you from prospering. So one who conceals his wrongdoings will not prosper. If you keep that guilt in mind, if you keep that shame on you, you won't be able to prosper. Learn from it. Correct yourself, like I'm trying to do today. Repent, and then maybe prosperity can happen. But more importantly, we need to trust in God. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says, "And he has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness." Our weakness isn't what we're relying on. God's power is what we need to be relying on. God's power is perfect. It can help all of us. We just need to remember that it's there. Okay, so enough of the guilt, right? We've all felt guilty at times. We've all had our fair share of shame. Wow, say that 3 times fast. There's always, of course, the fear. Of course, there's fear of corrupt processes. There's fear of losing control. There's fear of things not going the way you want them to. But in reality, when you let fear guide you, you're stepping away from God. I don't know about you, but I don't fear anyone more than God. God can do anything. Most people have limits, but God can do anything. Well, think of this story, a little story, just randomly written into my iPad here. A guy fell off a cliff, and on the way down, he's reaching out, grabbing all sorts of twigs that are sticking out the side of the cliff, and finally he gets one and he hangs on for his dear life. But it happens to be foggy. And as he was falling down, he was falling through fog, and he didn't know how far he fell. He didn't know how far down the cliff was, because it was just miles of fog. He cries out, "Somebody help!" And then he hears God's voice saying, "This is the Lord, trust me, let go, and I will catch you." And of course, like any person in that situation, you think, oh, I'm just hearing things, this is just my excited state, I'm going to call out again. I say, is anybody else there? But in his patience, the Lord once again says, "Trust me, let go, and I will catch you." He finally decides to let go. He thinks that's it. I can't hold on much longer anyway. No one's going to come to help me. I'm just going to let go. He lets go and falls 2 feet before reaching the ground. The fog disappears at that moment and reveals that 2 feet. See, the Lord has a lot of information we don't have. When there's a fog covering the ground, you don't necessarily know where that ground is, but the Lord knows. You don't know how far you have to fall in order to allow God to catch you. But the trick is, just let him help you. When he tells you he can help, he can help. Don't ask for someone else. Oh, here's another one. Every person is to be subject to governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. Now, including this, especially in the launch pad that I've used here today, is important because remember, even if we don't like the leader or the candidate, we have to remember that it's all instituted by God. This is all God's will, one way or the other. And I can't guarantee it's going to be pleasant for all of us. God never said it was going to be pleasant for all of us. In fact, I'm pretty sure of that. But if we don't let go and give it to God, then all we're doing is what is it, kicking against the goads? As Paul, or as Luke wrote in Acts, I think it was Paul that said that, but so by letting go, we give it to God, who ultimately knows what's best for us. But this comes with some worry, naturally some worry. But we're told not to worry. In fact, we're actually told not to fear either, several times. Jesus literally said, "Fear not." But let's not worry either. In Philippians, we're told, "Do not be anxious about anything. Let your requests be made known to God, And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to have that peace. You go into a voting booth, you vote for the person you're wanting to vote for, and you walk away feeling at peace. When was the last time you went into a voting booth and then walked away feeling at peace? Yeah. I'm not seeing anyone shaking their head, yes, this past week. No, that doesn't happen, does it? So we have to remember, if we let it go, sure, do your civic duty. If you want to vote. I mean, if you can and you want to, vote. But remember, it's still God. God's in charge. God's the leader we look to. God's the one that can give us that peace. Vote for God. And of course, this is a verse that I've been using since my mother passed away a few years ago. Helps try to keep me in check a little bit. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And that's true. Our worries often come when we think to the past or when we think to the future, and we assume a problem exists where maybe it doesn't. So why are we worrying about things that don't matter? Focus on the here and now. Let me put it a different way. I was allowing this issue to take up space in my mind rent-free for several days when I could have been in the here and now with my family, my friends, my loved ones. Which is more important? Let something that doesn't matter, that you can't control, take your mind away, or spend time with your loved ones. I think that's obvious, isn't it? So what is the common solution? Oh, before we get there, let me also mention one reason that worry is such a powerful challenge is that we often confuse decision-making and problem-solving. Decision-making, make the right decision. Problem-solving, well, first you have to have a problem, right? If you don't first have a problem, that doesn't mean go out and seek a problem. Don't find a problem just so that you can solve it. Sorry, hon, I do that all the time, I know. Now, both problem-solving and decision-making is required, but really the decision we need to make first is give it to God and let the problems come as they may. Don't anticipate the problem before it occurs. Did my vote change because I had to choose your party? No. But I did mention it to several people, which may have made their days not better, probably a little worse. So we need to focus on making the right decisions, but we need to focus on making the right decisions with God. And then we can worry about the problems as they come. Worry about today. Don't have to worry about tomorrow. So what's the common solution? Well, I think you probably figured this out. You've probably known this from the start, I hope. But the answer is trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. Recently, I've been reading a book. When I say reading a book, that's listening to it on audio tape, because if I read the book, I fall asleep. So I listen to it on audio tape, and I call it reading. We'll go with that. And this book talks about moral and political divisiveness in the nation and where it stems from. First 3 chapters were almost entirely on moral philosophy. because you have to have a basis to understand some of this stuff. And let's face it, sometimes I do get a little bit deep in overthinking things. But one of the things he said is oftentimes we use our reasoning to justify our emotions and not the other way around. It's hard to change your emotions. And so often your reasoning, your own understanding is used only to support your view. And for the record, he did have good evidence, good data behind this. But now I'm thinking about everything I do in my life, thinking about all the decisions I've made, thinking about every single thing. Am I doing it because it's my emotions driving me first? And my understanding is just there to support it. Easy solution. Don't worry about your own understanding. Just give it to God. Let the Lord tell you what to do. Let the Lord do it. I'm not burdening him. You know how I know that? He's an omnipotent God. He can do anything. That means he can also help me. He can also help you. So what we need to do is make the decision to give Christ care and control of our lives, knowing he'll guide us in working on the problems of our life afterward. God always has a plan, and it's always in place before the problem arises. You just have to get out of the way. Let it happen. But once you decide to give your life to Christ's care and control, you don't have to figure anything out. You simply need to learn how to follow him. Dwelling on stuff that doesn't matter doesn't help. All it does is it isolates you, or it brings other people down to your level. Instead, rise to theirs. God says in Micah, and this is a favorite verse of at least one of you in here, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is a whole lot easier than tapping the proper ballot on the screen on Tuesday. All you have to do, love mercy, act justly, and walk with God. And he'll lead you the rest of the way. So where are you today? Has something distracted you that was outside of your control and ultimately matters little? Don't let pride or guilt or fear or worry keep you from making the decision you need to make, and that is walking with God. Give your life to Christ's care and control. Let him establish his presence in your life. Then follow his leading and start experiencing freedom. His yoke is comfortable and his burden is light. We know this from Matthew. Matthew wrote that Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." So at this, if you need to accept Christ, or if you need to reaffirm God's will as your strategy for life, or if you need the strength to kick out that concern or issue that's been an unwelcome house guest in your mind, there's no better time than now. Consider coming forward as we stand and sing. I worship you, Almighty God. There is none like you.
you praise.